Take the plate back, Evelyn." Grant Hollis did not shout at first. That made it worse. The whole diner had gone quiet except for the rain ticking against the front windows and the low hiss of coffee burning on the warmer. Evelyn Carter stood in the middle aisle with a dinner plate balanced in both hands. Meatloaf, mashed potatoes, green beans, and the last warm roll from the kitchen. Across from her, in booth 7, an old man in a soaked brown coat sat with his hands folded in his lap, trying not to look hungry. Grant stepped out from behind the register and pointed at the plate. "Take it back," he said again, louder now. "Or take off that apron." A fork stopped halfway to a customer's mouth. Someone near the window gave a small laugh, not a happy laugh. The kind people give when they want to see which way power is moving before they choose a side. Evelyn felt every eye in the room settle on her. She was 58 years old, wearing shoes that pinched at the heel and a blue uniform washed so many times the name tag had begun to curl at the edge. In her apron pocket was a folded electric bill she had promised herself she would pay when Friday's check came. In her hands was the only dinner she had brought for herself that day. The old man had asked for nothing at first but coffee. Then, after 20 minutes of watching plates pass his booth, he had said quietly, "Mom, if there's anything left over, I can pay you back when I'm able." 2 young men at the counter had snickered. A woman with pearls at her neck had moved her purse closer. Mr. Dorsey, who had known Evelyn's late husband for 30 years, had suddenly become very interested in his tea. Evelyn had gone to the kitchen, unwrapped her own ups, and plated it properly. Not scraps, not leftovers, a meal. Then she had written the ticket herself. Paid in full, no charge to guest, EC. Grant saw it now on the counter. He snatched the yellow slip and held it up like evidence in a trial. "Paid in full," he said. "Paid with what, Evelyn? Your good intentions?" The room gave him a few nervous laughs. The old man lowered his head. Evelyn looked at the plate, then at the apron tied around her waist. For a moment, she thought of her late husband Paul standing at the grill years ago, saying the same thing he always said when someone came in short on money. "No one leaves hungry if there's bread left." Grant leaned close. "This is my diner," he said, "and I will not have you turning it into a charity for strays." That word struck the old man harder than the rain had. Evelyn saw his hand tremble once. Then she made her choice. She stepped past Grant, set the plate gently in front of the old man, and placed the fork beside his napkin. The sound was small. The silence after it was not. Grant's face went still. "You just bought yourself trouble," he said. The old man looked up, his eyes pale, tired, and strangely watchful. Beneath his frayed sleeve, Evelyn noticed the dull shine of an old gold cufflink. It did not belong with the coat, the wet shoes, or the trembling hands. Then the old man looked past Grant toward the oldest photograph on the wall, the one with Paul smiling beside Mrs. Bellamy on opening day, and in a voice almost too quiet to hear, he said, "Some owners forget what they were trusted with." Grant turned sharply. "What did you say?" But the old man only broke the roll in half, as if it were something sacred. Grant grabbed the edge of Evelyn's apron. "Kitchen. Now." The customers stared as she followed him past the counter. Evelyn could feel the heat of shame rising up her neck. She had carried coffee through breakfast rushes, wiped baby spills off booths, smiled through insults, and gone home with aching feet more nights than she could count. But she had never been marched through the diner like a thief. In the narrow hallway outside the kitchen, Grant turned on her. "You think this place runs on pity?" "No," Evelyn said quietly, "but I don't think it should run without it." His eyes sharpened. That man made customers uncomfortable. He was hungry. "You always make it sound simple." "Sometimes it is." Grant looked toward his office, where a cream-colored envelope sat on his desk under a stack of invoices. Evelyn had noticed it all week. Every time she entered, Grant covered it. His voice dropped. "You don't know what is happening here? Then tell me. I don't owe you explanations." "No," she said. "Just my paycheck." That landed. Grant's expression changed. He knew she needed that check. Everyone did. It was the kind of small-town knowledge people pretended not to have until they needed power over someone. He stepped closer. "One more sentimental mistake," he said, "and I will review every missing roll, every extra refill, every meal you decided was your business. And if the numbers point back to you, I will deduct it from your final pay." Evelyn went cold. "You would do that over one dinner?" Grant smiled without warmth. "I would do that over theft." When Evelyn returned to the dining room, the old man was still in booth 7. His plate was half empty now. He did not look victorious. He looked sad. As she passed, he said softly, "You apologize quickly." Evelyn stopped. "I haven't apologized, not out loud." She looked at him. The old man folded the remaining half roll into a napkin and placed it in his coat pocket. For later, he said. It was such a small thing that it nearly broke her. Grant watched from the register. The bell over the door rang once as a gust of wind pushed against it. The rain kept falling. The old photograph on the wall seemed to watch them all. And Evelyn suddenly understood that the most dangerous person in the diner might not be the angry man threatening her job. It might be the silent one everyone had decided was worth nothing. Evelyn found the meal ticket later in Grant's office trash. She had gone back there for a roll of receipt paper, though the truth was simpler. She needed one quiet minute where no one was looking at her like kindness was a stain. The ticket was crumpled but not torn. Paid in full, no charge to guest, EC. She picked it up, brushed coffee grounds from the corner, and pressed it flat against her palm. Her husband Paul had written those words for years. Not often, not loudly. Never so people would praise him. If a mother came in with 2 children and enough money for one bowl of soup, Paul wrote paid in full. If a man from the old mill came in after losing his job and pretended he had forgotten his wallet, Paul wrote paid in full. If someone came in alone on Christmas Eve and ordered only coffee, Paul put pie beside it and wrote paid in full. Evelyn used to tease him. One day you'll give away the whole diner. Paul would grin from the grill and say, then I hope it goes to somebody hungry. Back then, the place had been called Bellamy's Corner. It had red stools, real pie under glass, and a bell above the door that sounded like ordinary life. Paul had not owned the diner. Neither had Evelyn. But they had loved it the way some people love a church, a porch, or a kitchen table where the family still gathers after the funeral. Then Paul got sick. The bills came first politely, then like fists. Evelyn sold his truck, then her wedding china, then the little fishing boat he had always meant to fix. After he died, people said they would check in. Some did for a while. Then grief became old news. The diner remained. It was the one place where she still knew what to do with her hands. Pour coffee, clear plates, fold napkins. Smile when smiling was easier than explaining the emptiness waiting at home. When Grant Hollis took over management, he painted over the Bellamy's Corner sign and replaced it with Hollis Diner. He called the old ways inefficient. He called regulars low-margin traffic. He called Paul's photograph sentimental clutter, though he never quite dared take it down. Evelyn stayed anyway, because Paul's face was still on that wall, because the old counter still carried the shine of 1,000 elbows, because some mornings, when the kitchen door swung open and heat rolled out with the smell of onions and coffee, Evelyn could almost hear Paul call, "Order up, Evie." Now she stood in Grant's office, holding the crumpled ticket, and noticed again the cream-colored envelope on his desk, Harbor Ridge Development. This time, part of the page had slipped out. She saw only a few words: relocation incentive, redevelopment schedule, tenant hardship clause. Her stomach tightened. Before she could read more, Grant appeared in the doorway. "What are you doing in here?" Evelyn turned quickly. "Getting receipt paper." His eyes dropped to her hand. "You dug that out of the trash? It has my name on it. So does your schedule," he said. "And schedules can be changed." He crossed to his desk and placed his hand over the envelope. Evelyn glanced toward the wall behind him. There was a framed photograph she had never paid attention to before. A younger Grant stood beside an older man in front of a small hardware store with a sign that read closing sale. His father, maybe. Grant saw her looking. "That was my dad's place," he said. "He let everybody pay later. Half the town loved him. The bank loved him less." His voice had changed. There was something raw underneath it, something he hated showing. "I watched generosity bankrupt that man," Grant said. "So don't lecture me about kindness." "I wasn't lecturing, no. You were performing." The words hit harder than she expected. He stepped closer. "The landlord is tired of this block. So am I. This town wants warm memories and cheap coffee, but memories don't cover repairs. Cheap coffee doesn't pay insurance. And your little paid-in-full routine is exactly the disease that killed businesses like my father's." Evelyn looked at the envelope. "The landlord told you he wants to sell?" Grant's jaw tightened. "The landlord doesn't care what happens here. Then why are you hiding letters from developers?" For one second, his face changed. There it was, not guilt exactly, fear. Then he took the receipt paper from the shelf and shoved it into her hands. Back to work. When Evelyn returned to the floor, the old man was still in booth 7. The dinner was gone except for a smear of gravy and the napkin where the roll had been. She refilled his coffee. "I'm sorry," she said before she could stop herself. He looked at her. "For feeding me? For the way people acted. That was not yours to apologize for." Evelyn looked down. The old man's gaze moved to Paul's photograph. "You knew him?" "My husband. Kind eyes. He had kind everything. The words slipped out so softly she almost hoped he had not heard them. But he had. The old man reached into his coat pocket and touched the wrapped half-roll. "People like that leave marks," he said. "Did you know him?" The old man did not answer right away. Instead, he looked at the photograph again. Mrs. Bellamy stood beside Paul, smiling with one hand on the ribbon, her face proud and stern. "I knew of him," the old man said. Before Evelyn could ask what that meant, Grant called her name from across the room. A table needed clearing. A customer wanted fresh coffee. The busboy had dropped a tray and was staring at it like someone else should clean it. When Evelyn looked back, the old man was watching the whole diner again. Not like a beggar, like a judge who had not yet announced the sentence. By the time the dinner rush slowed, booth 7 was empty. The old man had left no tip, only a quarter beneath the coffee cup and a folded napkin where his hands had rested. Evelyn told herself not to be disappointed. Then she saw what he had written on the napkin. "Thank you for not asking what I was worth." She folded it carefully and placed it in the same pocket as the meal ticket. She did not yet know that by morning both pieces of paper would matter more than any amount of money in the register. By noon the next day, Grant had turned one act of kindness into a public case against her. It began with a staff meeting near the counter before the first lunch orders came in. The cook stood with crossed arms. Marlene, the other waitress, looked like she had not slept. The teenage busboy leaned on a tub of clean silverware, eyes fixed on the floor. Grant held a clipboard. "We have a problem," he said. "Inventory loss, customer complaints, unauthorized decisions." Evelyn stood at the end of the counter, still wearing her coat because the heat had been lowered again. Grant looked directly at her. "Last night, an employee gave away food without approval to a man who had already made paying customers uncomfortable." Marlene closed her eyes. Evelyn said, "He made them uncomfortable because he looked poor." Grant smiled faintly, and there it is, emotion over judgment, personal guilt over policy. He turned to the others. "This diner is hanging by a thread. If people want to keep their jobs, we cannot afford employees deciding the rules do not apply to them." No one spoke. Grant lifted the clipboard. "From now on, every extra item gets rung up, every roll, every refill outside the menu, every side. No exceptions." The cook muttered, "That'll make folks mad." Grant snapped, "Then they can be mad somewhere else." Evelyn looked around the room, waiting for one person to say this was wrong. Not dramatic, not heroic, just wrong. No one did. That silence hurt more than Grant. At lunch, Mr. Dorsey came in and sat in his usual booth. For years, Evelyn had brought him tea with extra lemon before he asked. Paul used to slip him pie after his wife died, saying grief needed sugar sometimes. Today, when Evelyn placed the tea down, Grant appeared behind her. "Ring the extra lemon," he said. Mr. Dorsey looked embarrassed. Evelyn went to the register and charged it. When she returned, Mr. Dorsey would not meet her eyes. "Grant may be harsh," he said softly, "but maybe he's just trying to keep the place open." Evelyn stared at him. This man had eaten Paul's free pie after his wife's funeral. He knew, and still he chose the safer story. "Maybe," Evelyn said. Her voice did not shake until she reached the kitchen. Later, she passed Grant's office and heard voices inside. The man from Harbor Ridge Development had returned. Evelyn could not see him clearly through the narrow glass, but she could hear Grant. "By Friday, she won't be a problem anymore." A chair scraped. The developer said something too low to catch. Grant answered, "The staff will fall in line once the sentimental one is gone." Evelyn stepped back as if the door had burned her. The sentimental one. That was what her whole life had become to him. Her marriage, her grief, her loyalty, her unpaid extra minutes after closing. Her hands cracked from sanitizer, her memory of every regular's favorite order. Sentimental. At 3 o'clock, she found Marlene in the supply closet, crying into a stack of clean aprons. "My son applied with Harbor Ridge," Marlene whispered. "Grant said if the redevelopment happens, there could be work, real work, benefits." Evelyn was too tired to be surprised. "So you believe him?" "I don't know what I believe." Marlene wiped her face. "I just know I'm scared. I'm scared too." Marlene looked at her then, truly looked at her. "I should have said something last night." "Yes," Evelyn said. The answer hung between them. It was not cruel. It was true. At 5 o'clock, Grant called Evelyn into the office. The cream-colored envelope was gone from the desk. So was the developer's folder. Only the photograph of Grant's father remained on the wall, the closing sale sign behind him like an old wound still giving orders. Grant did not ask her to sit. "I'm letting you go." Evelyn had expected it, but the words still struck the breath from her. For one plate of food? For insubordination, unauthorized use of inventory, creating a disturbance, violating policy after direct instruction. "I fed a hungry man. You embarrassed this business. You embarrassed yourself. His face darkened. Careful. She reached into her apron pocket and pulled out the crumpled meal ticket. No, she said. I've been careful for years. Grant's eyes fixed on the ticket. Give me that. It's mine. It's company property. It has my initials. It was written on my pad, in my diner, for food from my kitchen. Evelyn placed the ticket flat on his desk. It says paid in full. Grant picked it up, looked at the words, and for a moment Evelyn thought he might understand something. Instead, he tore it in half, then in half again. Evelyn stopped breathing. He dropped the pieces into the trash. There, he said, no record. Something inside her went very still, not broken, not weak, still. You can't erase what happened, she said. Grant leaned back. I already did. He told her final pay would be reviewed after inventory loss was calculated. He said he would mail whatever remained. He said she should not return unless contacted. Evelyn untied her apron. Her hands shook only when she folded it. That apron had carried tips, order pads, cough drops, Paul's old pencil, the folded electric bill, and more quiet grief than any piece of cloth should have to hold. When she walked out through the dining room, the diner went silent again. Marlene covered her mouth. The busboy stared at the trash can in Grant's office. Mr. Dorsey looked down at his tea. Evelyn stopped beneath Paul's photograph. For one terrible second, she felt as if she had failed him, failed the place, failed the promise that no one leaves hungry if there's bread left. Then she saw something strange. Booth 7 had been wiped clean, but beneath the edge of the table, scratched lightly into the old wood, were two initials she had not noticed in years, PC. Paul Carter. He must have carved them there decades ago, young and foolish and alive. Evelyn touched the mark once. Then she stepped outside into the cold evening with no apron, no job, and no proof left in her hand. Behind her, the bell above the door rang, and the diner kept serving dinner as if nothing had happened. The black car waited outside the diner with its engine off. That was the first thing Evelyn noticed the next morning. Not the crowd inside. Not Grant standing near the counter with a folder under his arm. Not the man from Harbor Ridge Development rolling blueprints across the table where families used to share pie after church. The car. It looked too polished for that cracked curb, too still for that nervous morning. Marlene had called before sunrise and said only, "Come down here, please. Something is happening." Evelyn had almost refused. Pride told her not to return to a place that had thrown her out. But Marlene's voice had sounded different. Not nosy, not dramatic, afraid. Now Evelyn stood just inside the door, no apron, no uniform, no name tag. For the first time in years, the diner looked at her not as a waitress, but as a woman it had wronged. Grant stopped speaking when he saw her. "You were terminated," he said. A voice from booth 7 answered. She was invited. Everyone turned. The old man from the storm sat in the same booth, but the torn coat was gone. His hair was combed back. His face was clean. He wore a dark wool suit and the same old gold cufflinks, polished now under the morning light. Grant's mouth tightened. "Who are you?" The old man placed both hands flat on the table. "My name is Arthur Bellamy." The name moved through the diner slowly. Bellamy, the old sign, the old photograph. The name painted above the door before Grant covered it. Grant forced a laugh. "Bellamy is just a name on building records." Arthur nodded.
"Yes, mine."
The developer reached for his papers. Grant looked from Arthur to the man in the suit. "Northline Holdings owns this block." "I own Northline Holdings," Arthur said. No one spoke. That was the first crack. Grant recovered fast because men like him survive by recovering fast. "If this is about last night," he said, "then you should know your little performance cost my employee her job. You came in dressed like a vagrant and expected professional treatment." Arthur studied him. "No," he said, "I expected human treatment." Grant's face flushed. "This is a business." "Yes," Arthur said. "That is what I came to find out." He opened a leather folder and removed a torn yellow meal ticket, carefully taped down the middle. Evelyn stopped breathing. "Paid in full. No charge to guest." E.C. Grant stared at it. "Where did you get that?" Arthur did not answer immediately. Marlene stepped forward, trembling. "I took it from the trash after you tore it up." Grant turned on her. "You had no right." Her voice broke, but she did not step back. "Neither did you." The diner changed in that instant. Not completely, not cleanly, but enough. Arthur placed the ticket on the counter. "This was the first proof," he said. Grant scoffed. "Proof of what? That she gave away food? That she understood something you did not." Arthur walked to the old photograph near the register. His finger rested lightly against the glass, near Paul's younger face. "My mother owned this building when that photograph was taken. She nearly sold it once, long before you came here. A winter came through this town and took jobs with it. Men stopped ordering full meals. Mothers split soup with children and pretended they weren't hungry. Most businesses tightened their fists. He looked at Evelyn. Your husband did not. Evelyn's eyes filled before she could stop them. Arthur continued, quieter now. I was 19, proud, angry. I told my mother Paul Carter was a fool for feeding people who might never pay. She brought me here after closing and showed me a stack of tickets he kept near the grill. Each one said the same thing. He looked at the taped paper. Paid in full. The room was utterly still. Paul told her a debt paid with dignity was still a debt paid. My mother never forgot that. Neither did I. Evelyn pressed her hand to her mouth. The meal ticket was no longer just hers. It was Paul's voice returning through paper. Grant shook his head. That has nothing to do with current financials. Arthur turned. Then let us discuss current financials. He removed another document. Prepare funds released 6 months ago and never used. A second paper. Customer decline reports submitted after you raised prices, cut regular menu items, and began charging for ordinary courtesies. A third. An intent letter to support redevelopment in exchange for a relocation payment and consulting fee. The developer closed his folder very slowly. Grant's confidence began to crumble. You don't understand, he said. This place was dying. Arthur looked around the room. No, Mr. Hollis, it was being starved. The word struck harder than shouting. Grant's jaw worked, but nothing came out. Evelyn looked at him and saw the truth settle over his face. Not the truth Arthur had brought, but the older one Grant had spent years running from. The photograph of his father's failed hardware store hung behind him. Closing sale, a dead business. A son who had sworn never to become a man praised for kindness and buried by debt. Grant swallowed. My father lost everything trying to keep a place like this alive, he said. People loved him right up until the bank took the house. I wasn't going to be him. Arthur's voice softened but did not excuse him. So you became someone who would have thrown your father out if he came in hungry. Grant looked wounded. Good, Evelyn thought. Then she hated herself for thinking it. But maybe some truths are supposed to hurt before they heal anything. Grant looked at Evelyn. You made me look cruel. Evelyn shook her head. No, Grant, I fed a hungry man. You decided what that revealed. No one laughed. No one looked away. And for once the silence belonged to the truth. Arthur Bellamy did not save the diner with a speech. He saved it with conditions. The redevelopment agreement was stopped, but not because nostalgia alone could pay bills. Arthur made that clear. The diner would reopen only if it became honest again. Clean books, repaired equipment, fair wages, a modest community meal fund, and a written rule that no employee would ever be punished for bringing a question of dignity to the table. Grant was removed from management that morning. He did not collapse. He did not beg. He stood behind the counter with his face pale and his hands empty, looking less like a villain than a man who had spent years running from his father's failure and arrived at his own. Evelyn watched him carefully. Part of her wanted him to hurt the way she had hurt when he tore the ticket. Another part of her was too tired for revenge. Arthur asked if she would help lead the reopening. Evelyn looked at the taped meal ticket on the counter, then at Paul's photograph. I'll help, she said, but I won't be used as decoration for a story about kindness. Arthur listened. If this place opens again, she continued, it pays people properly, it feeds people honestly, and nobody gets called astray under this roof.
Arthur nodded.
Agreed. 2 weeks later, the diner reopened, not perfect, better. The cracked step was affixed by Miss Dorsey, who came with a toolbox and an apology he could barely say out loud. Evelyn accepted the repair before she accepted the apology. That felt honest. Marlene washed windows until her hands went red, then finally told Evelyn she should have spoken sooner. Yes, Evelyn said. Marlene cried. Evelyn did not rush to comfort her. She had learned that some guilt needs a quiet room before it becomes courage. The busboy, who had laughed that night, came in every morning before school to scrub baseboards. For 3 days he said almost nothing. On the 4th, he stood beside booth 7 with a rag in his hand and whispered, I'm sorry I laughed. Evelyn looked at him. He was only a boy, but old enough to know that cruelty becomes easier when a room approves it. Don't be sorry because he turned out rich, she said. Be sorry because he was hungry. The boy nodded, and this time she believed he understood. Not everyone apologized. That mattered too. Some customers stayed away because the truth made them uncomfortable. Some crossed the street rather than past the windows. Some told themselves they would have acted differently if they had known the old man owned the block. Evelyn learned to let that be their burden. On reopening morning, she placed the taped meal ticket in a small frame beside the register. Beneath it, she wrote Paul's old words, "No one leaves hungry if there's bread left." Arthur came in just after 6 and sat in booth 7. "What'll you have?" Evelyn asked. He looked at the frame. "Whatever you gave me when I had nothing to offer." This time, she rang the meal through the register. Arthur reached for his wallet. Evelyn shook her head. "Already paid." "By whom?" She looked toward the kitchen, where the first tray of rolls had just come out warm. "By everyone who wants this place to be better than it was." Before Arthur could answer, the bell above the door rang again. A thin older man stepped inside, coat buttoned wrong, eyes uncertain. The room noticed him. That was the real test now. Not a billionaire's test, the town's. For 1 second, nobody moved. Then the young busboy picked up a menu. "Good morning, sir," he said softly. "Table or counter?" Evelyn felt something in her chest loosen. The man chose the counter. Coffee was poured, a roll was warmed, no one laughed. Outside, the town was still the town. It would forget sometimes. It would fail sometimes. People always do. But inside that diner, at least for that morning, dignity had a place to sit. Grant came by once near closing. He did not enter. Evelyn saw him through the window, standing across the street with his hands in his coat pockets, looking at the old sign Arthur had restored. Bellamy's Corner Diner. Not because the past was perfect, because some names carry promises. Grant looked thinner, smaller, human. For a moment, Evelyn wondered if he would come in, if he would apologize, if she was ready to hear it. But he only stood there for a while, then turned and walked away. Marlene came up beside Evelyn. "Do you wish he'd come in?" Evelyn watched Grant disappear around the corner. "Not today," she said. That was not bitterness. It was boundary. Later, when the last customer had gone and the chairs were turned upside down on clean tables, Evelyn stood alone by the register. The framed meal ticket caught the light, paid in full. For years, those words had belonged to other people, to unpaid meals, to hungry strangers, to Paul's quiet mercy. Now, for the first time, Evelyn wondered if they could belong to grief too. Not erased, not forgotten, not made painless, but honored. She touched Paul's photograph with 2 fingers. "You were right," she whispered. There was bread left. Then she turned off the dining room lights. The bell above the door gave one soft ring as she stepped outside. And the little diner held behind her, warm in the dark. Not because a billionaire had saved it, and not because money had fixed what greed had damaged, but because one tired woman had refused to let hunger be treated like shame. From that day on, everyone who entered Bellamy's Corner was measured not by what they could pay, but by the dignity they deserved before anyone knew their name. Some kindness looks too small to matter when it happens. A plate of food, a warm roll, a handwritten ticket, a woman standing alone while others laugh. But small kindness becomes powerful when it's something. Evelyn did not know the old man had money. She did not know he owned the block. She did not know anyone would ever thank her. That is what made her choice matter. The lesson here is not that every good deed will be rewarded. Real life is more complicated than that. The lesson is that character is revealed before the reward, before the applause, before the truth comes out. A town, a family, a business, even a single room can become colder when people stop protecting one another's dignity. And sometimes the person everyone dismisses is the one carrying the truth. So let me ask you this. If you had been sitting in that diner before anyone knew who the old man was, would you have spoken up for Evelyn? Or would you have stayed silent? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you value stories about dignity, justice, hidden truth, and quiet courage, consider subscribing to The Last Truth Stories.